Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talk Talk Speak podcast. Today, we're diving deep into some really fascinating material. It's all about a major shift, it seems, in U.S. engagement with the Middle East.
That's right. We're looking specifically at the Trump administration's strategy, particularly its big bet on artificial intelligence.
And also this huge infrastructure plan, the Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor.
IMEC. IMEC, exactly.
Yeah.
And our sources, articles, research papers, they paint a picture of this pivot away from just military stuff, more towards economic and tech partnerships.
Okay. And we've got details on Trump's trip there in mid-2025, these massive AI deals, changes in export policy, too.
Yep, all that. Plus the IMS details, and crucially, how regional stability, especially Gaza, plays into all of this.
And the scale is just, wow. Sources mention over $2 trillion in investments and deals during that trip alone.
It's huge. And it really does feel like a fundamental rethink.
So let's unpack that shift.
Yeah.
What's the core idea here? Moving away from traditional security.
Pretty much. The sources really stress this move towards economic and tech interdependence, especially with places like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar.
They're calling it commercial diplomacy.
Yeah, or sometimes sticky power. The idea is you build these deep economic and tech links, and while that creates a more lasting kind of influence, it sticks.
Okay. And that May 2025 visit was the big moment.
Seems like it. I mean, the sheer amount of money pledged. Defense, aviation, but really heavy on AI, tech, energy. It's mind-boggling.
What really jumped out at me, though, is this major reversal on AI chip exports. What happened there?
Right. So the Trump administration basically decided to roll back the stricter AI diffusion rule from the Biden era.
Which was aimed at China, primarily.
Mostly, but it was also affecting allies, in Europe, Asia, the Middle East, and enforcing it was apparently tricky.
A real headache, I bet.
Exactly. Plus, allies were concerned, and U.S. chip companies were definitely worried.
Worried about lost sales.
Lost sales, yeah, but also arguing, maybe ironically, that the restrictions could actually help China catch up if U.S. innovation stalled.
So what's the new approach?
Well, the Commerce Department is talking about a new, bold, inclusive strategy, working with trusted partners, supposedly, while still trying to keep the tech out of, enemy hands.
It sounds like a real tightrope walk.
Definitely, a very delicate balance.
And AI seems to be absolutely central to these new partnerships.
Yeah.
The deals, especially with Saudi Arabia and the UAE, are just astonishing. Let's start with the Saudis.
Right. Saudi Arabia, the scale there is immense. We're talking a $600 billion agreement, a lot focused on AI and energy infrastructure.
Any specific examples jump out?
Oh, yeah. NVIDIA selling over 18,000 of their top-tier Blackwell chips, the GB300s, to a Saudi company called Humane.
For what purpose?
For a huge 500-megawatt AI data center. And this is just part of Saudi Arabia's own, $10 billion plan for domestic AI infrastructure.
And it didn't stop there, right? Amazon's involved.
Yep. Amazon's putting in $5 billion for an AI special zone. And then there's DataVolt, a Saudi firm committing $20 billion to build AI data centers back here in the U.S.
Wow. Okay, so it's flowing both ways.
It seems so. Plus, the Saudi Wealth Fund wants to buy hundreds of thousands more chips from NVIDIA and AMD. And Humane also did a deal with Qualcomm for CPUs and other AI chips. It's a full-on sprint.
A sprint indeed. And the UAE, just as ambitious.
Absolutely. Their plan, $1.4 trillion, again, covering AI, tech, energy.
And the big data center project there?
Right. The G42-led consortium, Microsoft might be involved too. They want to build potentially the world's biggest AI data center cluster outside the U.S. We're talking 5 gigawatts, 10 square miles. It's enormous.
5 gigawatts.
Yeah.
It's hard to even imagine. And the chips.
They're expecting something like 500,000 top-tier NVIDIA chips annually. G42 keeps about 20%. The rest goes to U.S. companies operating there.
And there's a formal partnership now.
Yeah, the U.S.-UAE AI Acceleration Partnership. And like with the Saudis, there's a commitment for the UAE to build reciprocal AI infrastructure in the U.S.
So this is really emphasizing the two-way street idea.
Exactly. And even Qatar is involved, though maybe on a slightly smaller scale initially. A $1 billion joint venture focused on quantum computing.
Quantum, okay, so strategically, what's the big picture behind all these AI deals? It's not just money, right?
Definitely not. A huge driver, our sources say, is countering China's tech influence. The narrative is clearly about aligning the Middle East's tech future with U.S. standards, not Beijing's, making China the biggest loser in this.
So the Middle East becomes a key battleground in the U.S.-China tech war.
Precisely. Establishing America-first tech dominance, setting global standards. The deals often have U.S. companies managing facilities, plus the reciprocal investments back here. It all ties together.
And this sticky power idea comes back in.
Yeah, it's all about embedding U.S. influence through these deep economic and tech ties, make it harder, more costly for these countries to shift alliances later on. It seems very transactional, very commercial.
But wait, transferring all this super advanced AI tech, relaxing export controls, aren't there massive security risks here?
That's the elephant in the room, yeah. Our sources highlight several big concerns. Leakage is number one.
Leakage to China, Russia.
Both, especially given, existing links. Geopolitics and Huawei, for example. Huawei and Alibaba Cloud are already quite active in the UAE.
And there are actual reports of the UAE being used as a transshipment point for chips to China.
There are reports suggesting that, yes, it's a serious worry.
So how strong are these strong U.S. security standards the administration talks about? Are there details?
That's the question. The sources suggest there may be less specific than what the Biden team reportedly demanded for the Microsoft G42 deal, for instance.
What did the Biden team demand?
Apparently things like G42 having to cut ties with certain Chinese tech firms before Microsoft could invest. The Trump deals seem perhaps less explicit on those kinds of conditions publicly. Though the counter-argument is that having U.S. companies operate the data centers and manage the cloud services in the UAE provides inherent oversight.
Okay, but beyond international leakage, what about domestic impacts? Are we shipping away chips we need here?
That's another major concern raised, yeah. Critics, including some Senate Democrats apparently, worry we're prioritizing Gulf interests over U.S. needs. Could it deplete chips for our own AI developers? Slow down U.S. progress?
Especially with existing chip shortages and data center power constraints.
Exactly. You could potentially make those problems worse. And long-term, could U.S. AI companies become dependent on Gulf energy to train their models? That gives Saudi Arabia and the UAE significant leverage down the road.
Okay, taking a step back.
Yeah.
Strategically, what's the assessment of this whole AI-centric approach? It feels risky.
There's definitely a paradox, as you say, America first tech diplomacy, but you're potentially building up future competitors or creating new dependencies on Gulf capital and energy.
Like we're arming, technologically speaking, future independent players.
Kind of. And remember, these Gulf states have their own big ambitions for sovereign AI. They're not just passive recipients. They want to diversify their economies.
Right.
So you have this tension. Short-term deals versus long-term stability. Are the deals enough without a stronger foundation of shared values, security guarantees, enforcement?
Especially when these states are also playing ball with China and others.
Exactly. They're balancing their relationships. Plus, you have the ongoing concerns about dealing with authoritarian regimes, human rights. Those issues don't seem central here.
And the whole thing relies on U.S. policy staying consistent, which isn't always guaranteed.
That's always the wild card, isn't it? Policy shifts can undo years of strategy.
Okay, let's switch gears to IMS, the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. How does this fit into the bigger picture?
IMS is incredibly ambitious, potentially reshaping regional and global economics and strategy, announced back at the G20 in India in 2023.
And the basic idea is connectivity. India to Europe via the Middle East.
Right. Two main corridors, an eastern one, India to the Gulf, and a northern one, Gulf to Europe.
But it's more than just trains and ships, yeah?
Oh, much more. It's multimodal. Railways, ports, shipping, roads, but also energy grids, clean hydrogen pipelines, and really importantly, digital infrastructure. Subsea data cables.
Who are the main players signed on?
You've got India, the U.S., Saudi Arabia, UAE, the EU, France, Germany, Italy. And Israel and Greece are pegged as key transit hubs.
And strategically, this is seen as a counter to China's Belt and Road.
Absolutely. That's a huge part of it. It's framed as a more transparent, sustainable, democratic alternative. It's also part of the G7's bigger infrastructure push, the PGII.
Now, how does India's own push, like Make in India and these AI hubs we discussed, connect with IMS?
There's a lot of potential synergy. India's a key driver, obviously wants to boost its trade, connect better, rely less on Suez. IMEC could leverage India's manufacturing growth, its ports.
And India's tech strengths.
Crucial. IT services, their digital payment system, UPI, the tech workforce, all assets for IMS. There's even this proposal, the Secure and Aligned AI Initiative, or SAAI.
SAII. What's that?
Basically integrating secure AI infrastructure within IMS, combining India's digital capabilities with U.S. cybersecurity know-how.
Okay, that makes sense. And the Middle East AI investments we talked about, how do they plug in?
Well, the digital connectivity part of IMS, those high-speed data cables, is vital for the Gulf's ambition to be tech and trade hubs. It supports their data centers, their AI plans.
And AI could help run IMS itself.
Exactly. Logistics, transport management, AI and automation could make it way more efficient. Plus, the corridor helps trade AI hardware and software, boosting innovation across the whole route.
It sounds amazing on paper. But what about feasibility? Can this actually be built?
That's the multi-hundred billion dollar question. There are huge potential economic upsides.
Like what?
Reduced transport times, India to Europe, maybe by 40%. Lower logistics costs, maybe 30%.
Okay.
Big boost in trade volume, potentially $200 billion more annually. Plus supply chain resilience, jobs, green energy trade, hydrogen, solar. Israel wants to export green tech via IMS too.
Okay, sounds great. But the roadblocks must be massive.
They are. Geopolitics is huge. The Gaza conflict is just crippling progress right now. Makes Haifa and Israel look like a risky bet as a key port.
And Saudi-Israel normalization still hasn't happened.
Still hasn't happened. And that scene is pretty crucial. Plus, you've got the Saudi-Iran rivalry, proxy conflicts adding instability.
And key countries are left out. Turkey, Egypt.
Yeah, excluding players like Turkey, Egypt, Qatar, Iran. That could lead to competition or just less cooperation. Egypt's obviously worried about its Suez Canal income.
And the cost. You mentioned hundreds of billions.
Over $500 billion is the estimate. Finding that cash from sovereign wealth funds, development banks, private investors is a monumental task. The G7 aims for $600 billion for PGII by 2027, but how much goes to IMS specifically? Unclear.
Plus just the logistics of building across so many borders, different rules.
Exactly. Infrastructure gaps, harmonizing regulations, customs, standards. It's incredibly complex.
So who's actually driving this thing forward? Is there momentum?
There seems to be a renewed push. Modi in India, Trump reportedly in early 2025. The G7 called for a 36-month roadmap. There were plans for a partner summit.
And specific envoys appointed.
France and Italy appointed IMEC envoys, yeah. And this Indo-Mediterranean initiative launched to track progress. Plus, the I2U2 group, India, Israel, UAE, US, is seen as supportive.
Still, it feels like a massive geopolitical gamble.
It absolutely is. It's a test case for this corridor geopolitics, this techno-economic statecraft. Can you really get this level of cooperation in such a volatile region?
And it's not just about the physical stuff, the ports and rails?
No, the software is key. Regulations, digital standards, data governance, talent. Aligning India's UPI with EU's GDPR. That alone shows the challenge. Initiatives like SAAI highlight how vital that digital layer is.
So ultimately, can the economic and strategic goals outweigh the huge political and security hurdles?
That's the core question. Can economic integration really foster stability here? History suggests it's tough. It's a huge bet.
Which brings us back to Gaza. Our sources stress how critical regional stability is. What's the Trump administration's Gaza policy look like in these docs?
It seems focused on economics, growth, education, jobs for Palestinians, less emphasis on the traditional two-state solution.
Any specific ideas mentioned?
Talk of making Gaza a free zone, some criticism of past nation building, aid distribution via the Gaza Humanitarian Fund, but also Senate Democrats pushing to end the Israeli aid blockade.
I remember hearing about some more controversial past proposals, too.
Yeah, those float around in the sources. Ideas like the U.S. taking over Gaza or even relocating residents to Egypt or Jordan, though it's unclear if these were ever official policy when the sources were written.
And how were those received?
Strongly rejected by Arab leaders. They tend to back Egypt's reconstruction plan, which the U.S. and Israel apparently rejected because of Hamas's role. White House statements on displacement were apparently ambiguous, calling it temporary, saying no U.S. funds involved.
So how does this Gaza situation directly impact IMEC and the broader strategy?
Hugely negatively. It slammed the brakes on the Abraham Accords momentum. Saudi-Israel normalization, key for IMEC, is now tied by the Saudis to progress on Palestinian statehood.
So normalization is effectively stalled.
Pretty much stalled at a broader level, yeah. Though some state-level engagement continues, and interestingly, a new land route popped up, UAE to Israel via Saudi Jordan, bypassing the Red Sea troubles. Shows pragmatism, maybe.
But overall, Gaza instability undermines IMEC.
Massively. Investor confidence takes a hit, security risks, especially for Haifa port. Without some kind of sustainable peace, IMEC's northern corridor looks really shaky. Some analysts say integrating Gaza into IMEC could help stability long term, but that's a distant prospect right now.
It really feels like Gaza is the critical bottleneck.
Absolutely. It's blocking Saudi-Israel normalization, undermining regional stability, both essential for IM. And U.S. policy on Gaza risks alienating Arab partners if it's seen as biased or destabilizing.
And the economic approach alone might not be enough.
That's the risk. Trying to achieve economic peace without addressing the core political issues, the historical grievances, it's a tough sell. Saudi Arabia's stance on statehood proves that. Public opinion in Arab countries matters immensely too. You need political buy-in, not just economic projects.
Okay, so wrapping this all together, what are the big strategic implications? The future outlook?
Well, the U.S. is definitely trying to reshape its Middle East relationships, moving towards this AI-driven sticky power, supporting Gulf ambitions to become tech hubs, diversifying their economies. This could shift the regional power balance.
And it's a new front in the U.S.-China tech contest.
Clearly. Make the Middle East reliant on U.S. tech, use IMEC to counter BRI. China sees it as containment, naturally, and is pushing its own tech self-sufficiency, leveraging its strengths in areas like solar and grids.
Do Chinese analysts think the U.S. strategy will work?
Sources suggest they think the U.S. might be underestimating China's resilience, and also the Gulf states' desire to, keep options open, work with multiple powers. China's reaction to IM itself seems cautious, sees potential overlap, but also notes opposition from excluded countries.
So the U.S. gamble is diffusing its tech to set standards versus the risk of it spreading.
Yeah, it's a high-stakes bet. The U.S. has the edge in computing power now, but for how long?
And the long-term sustainability. Unintended consequences.
Plenty of potential downsides. A regional AI arms race, more U.S. dependence on Gulf money or energy, alienating allies, ethical issues selling AI to authoritarian states.
Plus environmental concerns. Data centers use tons of power and water.
Huge ESG considerations. The need for green energy, sustainable practices, thankfully mentioned in some deals, is critical. And robust AI governance, privacy, security, ethics.
So looking out to, say, 2035. What are the scenarios?
Success looks like IM thriving, integrating regions, Middle East AI hubs booming, tied to the U.S. ecosystem, China's influence checked, stability through interdependence.
Unfailure.
Failure looks like IMEC stalls due to conflict, funding gaps. AI deals lead to tech leakage or bad dependencies. Gulf states hedge between U.S.-China. The region stays fragmented. U.S. influence wanes despite the tech push. More global tech polarization.
So empowering Gulf states with AI is truly a double-edged sword.
Exactly. Short-term influence, market access, versus potentially creating more autonomous players down the line whose interests might diverge, especially if U.S. policy flip-flops.
And IMEC's success depends on more than just concrete and steel.
Far more. It needs a real shift in regional cooperation, trust, multilateralism involving private sector, civil society. That soft infrastructure, governance, regulations, trust is vital and incredibly hard to build in this environment. The G7's 36-month roadmap acknowledges it's a long haul.
Without that deep cooperation, IMC could just be fragmented projects.
That's the risk. A collection of projects, not a transformative corridor. The corridor of peace narrative is appealing, but the reality is incredibly complex.
Well, this has been incredibly insightful, really unpacking the layers here, the tech ambitions, the massive economic plays, and how they crash into these deep geopolitical fault lines. It certainly shapes how you think about the future of this vital region.
Absolutely. It gives you a lot to chew on, thinking about the long-term ripple effects of tying all these threads, AI, infrastructure, diplomacy together.
Thank you for joining us. See you next time.